Well, Manso and Clay Ferraro, Miami Sports Pod this week is all about football, Clay. It's about time because we've talked so much about the previews and what we've seen in camps and all these things, but we finally have football play. We saw the Canes play on Saturday, a dominant performance against Bethune. We'll see the Dolphins play this Sunday at home against the Patriots. We're going to talk about both. First of all, a look back at what the Canes did, and then look ahead and preview the Dolphins season. But let's start with Mario Cristobal. Let's start with the Hurricanes. I know it was Bethune. I know they were expected to win big, but your overall thoughts of what you saw of UM in that opener against Bethune-Cookman was what?
You couldn't have asked for much more. I mean, for an opener, and look, I know they gave up some explosive plays, and you want to get those things cleaned up. But I think what you wanted to see from this team was, did the buy-in that you heard about all off season translate to game action? And by that I mean, all right, so all the strength and conditioning stuff, Mario's talked about the blueprint that they laid out for these guys that was extremely difficult and challenging, and they were going to. So what you saw was a team that, not just the starters, but the backups, when they went in there, they dominated the guys across from them. That's all you can ask for in an opening game like that. And I love that we saw a commitment to the running game. And even though you're missing Jalen Knighton and Don Chaney, Henry Parrish looked really good, but I thought more important relative to the rest of the season was your line looked good. Your line looked really good. And so it was like all the things that you put in front of those guys in spring ball, in the offseason with conditioning, it all culminated in what we saw on Saturday, which was doing what you're supposed to do if you're a really good college football program. And it doesn't mean they're going to go undefeated. It doesn't mean they're going to beat Southern Miss this week. Doesn't mean they're going to beat Texas A&M. But what it means is the trajectory is heading in the right direction. You're building towards what you want to do, and you did what you're supposed to do week one. That's all you can ask for.
Yeah, and I thought, there's a few areas that I could highlight that I liked and that I think are important. You touched on one of them, the offensive line. I think Mario Cristobal being a former offensive lineman, obviously that's an area that, I even saw him, pregame working with guys and getting in there and mixing it up with the offensive lineman pregame, working on technique. We've seen that at practices out in Coral Gables. I think I was impressed with that. I love the ground game, as you mentioned, 305 yards rushing, fittingly, I guess, to 305 in Mario's debut with the Canes. I like the fact that they're third and fourth string running backs. You talk about Parrish, and you also you look at Thaddeus Franklin. Those guys are really not supposed to be your main guys. Your main guys are supposed to be Jalen Knighton and Don Chaney, who were both out and expected to be back soon. So when I look back at what I saw, those two areas were important. But I also liked the special teams. I thought the special teams, were outstanding. The kick returns by Keyshawn and, the touchbacks by Borgalis. I think those are areas, and I know that that's boring to talk about, but what's one of the areas that really frustrated us? One of the things that frustrated us about the Manny Diaz era was that they were so bad at fundamentals, at things that you take for granted, but you shouldn't take for granted. And part of that is special teams, unforced errors and mistakes that you make, bad field position, not taking care of the little things that you really can take care of. That is disappointing. And that's what was kind of a hallmark of the Manny Diaz era. And I think when you talk about the change and the hard work, it's not always about passing yards and rushing yards and NFL prospects and players. It's about a mindset. And I think Mario's mindset with these kids is, hey, go out there and take care of the basics. We'll help you take care of the rest. We're going to try to make you the best football players possible. And I thought when you look at depth in those areas, running back in particular, I thought the fans were into it. They loved it. It was great to see the excitement too, Clay. I love the genuine excitement from Miami fans because I think that's something that, Miami fans right now have not been, they haven't been feeling great of late of what they've seen. And I think the fact that they went out there and they saw a team that just kind of had its head on straight, that doesn't mean everything's perfect. As you mentioned, that doesn't mean they're going to go undefeated. That doesn't mean that there are a ton of areas where they need to get better. But I just think overall, you look at what they were able to accomplish, and I think it was a good step one in what Mario brings. And by the way, we didn't even talk about Tyler Van Dyke because Tyler looked like the guy that everybody expects to be efficient, solid, strong, can make every throw. And I think really when it comes down to it, that's what's you're going to dictate what kind of season Miami has is what Tyler Van Dyke is.
Yeah, and obviously, as you step up in competition, you're not going to be able to just run all over the opponent that you play. And so,
Yeah.
what I'll be looking for in these next few weeks, and obviously it's going to be fully on display because you're not going to be able to hide from it when you play Texas A&M. But with Southern Miss coming up, I want to see how the receivers play. I think that's the next step for this team because you're not going to have second and third and short over and over again. And
True.
Xavier Restrepo had a couple of nice plays, so there is reason to feel optimistic, and yet until you take that next step up in competition and you're forced to throw from the pocket on a known passing down, are
Mhm.
guys going to get open? And once they get open, are they going to catch the football? Because I'm not concerned about Tyler Van Dyke. I know he can make every throw on the field. I know that he's going to put the ball where it needs to be. But are the guys going to catch it? Are they going to
I
get
think
open?
I think receivers, to your point, and I want you to keep going, but receivers is the one category we didn't get an answer
No way to
because that
know.
was a question in camp, and Tyler only threw the ball 16 times, completed 13. It's hard. That's the one thing you really didn't see against Bethune, but it was more a product of the fact that they ran for 305 yards.
Yeah, and that's you did what you wanted to do, which was dominate up front, and the byproduct of that is you're not going to be throwing the ball, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
you you can't accomplish everything you want to accomplish in week one. So now you're taking a step up against Southern Miss, and I would expect to see more design passing plays, more routes where you're giving guys a chance to win. It's not just going to be like
Mhm.
your flare outs and your wide receiver screens and stuff like that. It's hey, we got to see these receivers win some one-on-one battles, and
Yeah.
I know that if they do, Tyler Van Dyke's going to put it where it needs to be, and are they going to catch it? I mean, it's we're talking about such simple stuff, but I mean, in the end, this is a simple game, and if you do the things
Yeah.
you're supposed to do, you don't commit silly penalties. And that was one thing, by the way, that Mario Cristobal was furious about was one of the celebrations. I mean,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that's
Cam Kitchens had the pick, and then he slammed the ball down, and Mario immediately grabbed him because he knew it was
yeah.
15-yard penalty right there the second you do that.
But those are the types of things that like you nip in the bud right now, and
Mhm.
you got to get the simple stuff down first, and then you start to think bigger picture. So the simple stuff week one, dominate the opponent up front. They did that. Simple stuff week two, I want to see can these guys get open and catch the ball against a better quality
A better
competition.
quality, yeah.
And then we start talking about Texas A&M,
Yeah,
and then
road game,
however
I
you,
guess, yeah.
yeah. So
That's a tough one.
that's what I want to see next. And we didn't get a chance to see it this game, but that's going to be like, is this team just laying the groundwork for the future, or can
Mhm.
this 2022 group do something big?
And look, we didn't get a chance to do a preview, and I think something big for this team, and I'll keep it simple. I think something big for this team is, playing the ACC title game and have an opportunity to win the ACC. I'm not thinking national title. I don't know and don't see, again, as good as Tyler is, I don't think they have enough to this year be a contender in the playoff. But then again, if you're playing for an ACC title and you happen to win that, you've got the opportunity to represent the ACC. But I just don't know if they're there yet. That's asking a lot for a coach who's taking over a program that had a lot of issues that Manny Diaz left behind that they need to fix and that Mario's trying to fix. It's not going to happen overnight. I will say this: defensively was an area I was looking at a lot, Clay. I thought they gave up too many chunk plays. I thought, against a better opponent, they'll finish drives, and I thought there were opportunities for Bethune. They had at least that I remember a half dozen plays that went 20 plus yards, 30 yards or so. You can't have that against good opponents because you're taking up such big parts of the field. It's going to lead to touchdowns. It's going to lead to issues. I think they got to fix that, figure that out, what was going on there. A little bit was probably the excitement over pursuing one play. They were going for a pick, turned into a touchdown, other misdirection plays. There's talent on defense. Gilbert Frierson had the pick six, but I think if there's an area, and Mario loves it, no coach will ever find things perfect, right? There are areas he's going to be able to nitpick. I think that's one of them. But I think overall, as we cap this up, it was a good first effort for the Canes in their opener.
Yeah, and I remember Frank Beamer always used to say, "Good football teams improve the most from week one to week two," and it's because all the things that like you're not sure what they're going to look like in week one,
Mm-hmm.
you find out in week one, and then you realize very quickly, okay, either we can't do this or we can if we improve X, Y, and Z, and
Yeah.
so that's one. And number two, Cam Wake said this a few years ago for the Dolphins when this was the year, I think it was 2017, when they just kept giving up big plays. And everybody was blaming defensive coordinator. And Cam Wake said, look, there is no defense that is designed to give up a 50 or 60 yard play. if you're giving up a play that big, it's because somebody didn't do their job.
Yeah.
And when you're giving up chunk plays and the types of chunk plays that we're talking about that the Canes gave up, it wasn't like getting physically beat. It was, like you said, they were going for a pick on one of them, guys out of position. That stuff is fixable.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that's what I want to see. So you combine what Frank Beamer said, what Cam Wake said. Can you get those guys to jump? Can you get them to get that level of improvement by simply getting to where they're supposed to be? And if it's not a physical thing, which it's not, then that's the true test of this coaching staff. And I want to see that against Southern Miss. I want to see fewer chunk plays and receivers getting open. Those are the two things I'll be looking for this week.
Home game against Southern Miss. That game Clay just mentioned. That after that road game, first one of the season at Texas A&M, and a nationally televised nighttime game. So that should be a lot of fun. But a good start to the Mario Cristobal era. Now we're getting ready to start the Mike McDaniel era, and the Dolphins open up the season against the Patriots on Sunday. Clay, what are you most looking forward to? Having seen the preseason, having seen the camp and everything, what we saw from this team, what do you like? What are you looking for, and what are you expecting starting Sunday?
I want to see if the Tua that we saw in training camp transfers over to regular season games.
Is it as simple as that? I mean, is that where we're starting right off the bat?
Yeah,
it's Tua. It's Tua. Can Tua take that strong camp?
And by the way, let me add some context to that. What I've said all along is the one thing Tua has not had at all since he's been a pro is a running game. Quarterback's best friend is a running game. He hasn't had that at all. So can this Mike McDaniel offense, and I feel like those three words go together now, but can this Mike McDaniel offense that he's brought over from San Francisco and also from his years coaching at other stops, can they run the ball as efficiently as we saw the 49ers run, as we saw Atlanta run when he and Kyle Shanahan were there? Can you finally add a running game to this offense to where Tua isn't having to do all this stuff in the passing game? Like, when you're forced to do something passing because you're in 2nd and 9, 3rd and 7, it's a whole lot more difficult than when you're in 2nd and 4 or 3rd and 2. And also, it's a whole lot more difficult when you're trying to do all that and you don't have Tyreek Hill. So I guess what I want to see
that's the flip side. Yeah.
Are all these reasons why we're optimistic? Do they actually play out in practice? Like, do we actually see them on the field in a regular season meaningful game? Because it sure looked really good in training camp, and it sure looked really good in that last preseason game.
I mean, what that comes down to it with Tua is that, I think keeping him upright is important. That's why you look to improve the offensive line, which they feel they did, and, getting Teron Armstead and Connor Williams and, the way they've moved things around. Getting the weapons, and you mentioned Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Cedric Wilson, Eric Azukama. I mean, Mike Gesicki's still around. You think that he's going to have the weapons. Raheem Mostert, Chase Edmonds, nice additions. And then you look at the fact that they could potentially run the ball. So do the math on that for Tua. Protect him, right? Give him weapons, and then give him the other team something else to think about with the run game. Those are all things that Tua so far has not gotten. And Clay, we've done, and I think I'm as guilty of it as anyone. I think you are as well. And I think anybody in the media, particularly South Florida, has done it. We have been very, I think, kids' gloves, right, with Tua. Oh, but Flo didn't like him. Oh, he didn't have the weapons in his O-line, and he was always on his back and running for his life, and they didn't have the support from everybody. Now he's got all that, and that's great, Clay. But at some point, the old kid's gloves comes off, right? Now it's like, now Tua, it's on you. You have been given everything that you wanted, everything that everyone has kind of protected you with. Again, us included in that. I don't think Tua has gotten a fair shot the last couple of years to really be the quarterback that the Dolphins hope and expect he could be in. Oh, by the way, I didn't even mention, you got him a whole new offense in Mike McDaniel, who's an offensive guru and a quarterback guru that, you think, okay, that's going to help him as well. So when you put it all together, Clay, the excuses are done. The opportunity is there. Tua Tagovailoa has to take that next step. I believe he will. I think you believe he will. More importantly, I think the Dolphins, Mike McDaniel, his teammates believe he will. But now it's time to do it.
And this is it. There is, at the end of this year, we will know definitively. And I firmly believe that. And, I got here for the last few years of Ryan Tannehill. I got here in 2014.
Sorry about that.
Well, but Will, they're not going to repeat that. I firmly believe, and this is something that I think if you're a Dolphins fan, you can feel a little bit of comfort. You're not going to do that again, where every year is this the year that Ryan Tannehill proves that he's a franchise quarterback? No, this is the year, one way or another, with Tua Tagovailoa. We're going to know at the end of this year, is he a franchise quarterback?
Yeah, they've given him too much. They've given him too much. And when I say that, I don't mean in a bad way. I mean, they've given him everything he needs to succeed. The confidence, the O-line, the weapons, and hopefully the ground game.
And I don't say this because like I don't want anybody to get hurt. I do think, though, we've also reached the point, because we did this with Ryan Tannehill too, where at some point availability becomes an ability. And so the other thing I don't want to hear at the end of this year is
go out there 16 games. Yeah.
Right. Like if he gets hurt, you can't say, oh, well, let's try this again next year. No, this has to be the year regardless, no matter what happens. And by the way, Will, that doesn't just mean wins and losses. Obviously, that's the most important thing. But you could foresee a season with the Dolphins where, man, Tua balls out and he's great. And Tyreek Hill has an all-pro level year and the chemistry is there. But for whatever reason, the defense takes a significant step back. Maybe the cornerback depth is badly exposed. And this team finishes 9-8 or 8-9, but their offense is well, you don't have to make the playoffs this year to find out if you've got a franchise quarterback or not. Flip side of that's true as well. If Tua doesn't improve this year, and I mean significantly, but you find a way to win 10, 11 games and make the playoffs because maybe Tyreek Hill has a bunch of yak and he makes a lot of plays on his own, and the defense turns out to be just as good as it was the last couple of years. I want to be able to evaluate Tua just based on his performance, not based on wins and losses. Is he the quarterback? When you watch him, can you say, if things go well around him, he is a Super Bowl quarterback, a quarterback that you can win a championship with? Not necessarily because of, I don't necessarily need to see that, but is he better than a Jimmy Garoppolo? Is he somebody that he's going to be able to take control of this offense? And that's what I want to find out at the end of this year. And I think they've given every opportunity to
they have. That level. By the way, national media is starting to catch on. I've read a lot in the last week or two and seen a lot in the last week or two that the Dolphins are a contender, not just for the playoffs, but a dark horse candidate to make a Super Bowl run. And after 24 years of covering the Dolphins, part of me wants to say that and then I know how ridiculous it sounds because a team that hasn't won a playoff game in years and barely has made the playoffs in the time that I've been here, 20 plus years. It's a lot to jump to just say Super Bowl, but we see it year in and year out. We see, look, last year the Bengals, Joe Burrow took the step. He was incredible, and they gave him weapons, and you had Jamar Chase and all these guys, and T. Higgins and Joe Mixon and all these guys, and all of a sudden their defense was better, and they're a Super Bowl team. So who's to say the Dolphins can't be that team? I think the second question too, Clay, is what is Mike McDaniel as a head coach? Who is he? What's interesting, the schedule makers putting Bill Belichick as the first challenge along the way. I know Dolphin fans hate Belichick. And I think, post Tom Brady, I think a lot of NFL fans are wondering, well, how good is Belichick really without Brady? He's still damn good. He still can devise plans to wreak havoc on an opposing young quarterback, an opposing team. I think all this talk about the preseason and the Patriots not looking good is all silly. I think teams obviously withhold what they're going to do and have plans for the season. The Patriots have been game planning for the Dolphins for weeks, if not a couple of months, since they've known that was their opener. Bill Belichick has a plan. Whether it succeeds, I don't know. But it's going to be interesting because you want to see, you look at what Tua and the progression, and you see what he did, and you look what this team went through this offseason and prepping and, the work they've done. A lot will ride on what Mike McDaniel can do game in and game out. And Clay, that's the part we don't know, right? That's the part we know he's smart. We know he's a great soundbite. We know he knows offense, and we know he's got a plan. But what's going to happen when it's a key fourth down? What's going to happen when it's, do you punt or do you go for it? What's going to happen when you're trying to figure out, situationals in games, when to call a timeout? That's the difference, as we know, in most games between a win and a loss. You look back and go, man, why did they go for it? Why didn't they punt? Why did they do this? Why did they do that? Those are things we're going to learn from Mike McDaniel starting right away against the Patriots.
Yeah, and that's why I love that they're facing off against Bill Belichick in week one. And I don't expect to take that away in week one. And also, Mike McDaniel isn't going to be as good of a coach in week one this Sunday as he's going to be in 3 or 4 weeks. He's not going to be as good of a coach in 3 or 4 weeks as he's going to be in 3 or 4 years. I mean, there's going to be a learning process along the way. That doesn't mean that he can't be really good and he can't make an impact early on. And I do think that there are going to be some, I don't want to say growing pains, but simple stuff like communication in the headset and hey, dealing potentially with injuries because for whatever reason the hitting is a little bit harder, and like how do you manage those situations as a head coach? It's a lot. But I think one thing we've seen from him is that he's not going to get flustered by anything. He's going to go out there and be himself. And so is there going to be some learning that has to be done along the way? Sure. But I also don't think we're at a point where they're gonna lose a game because of him. I don't think they're gonna necessarily win a game because he's like doing something crazy in game. It's going to be about how does he get this team prepared week in and week out. What are the adjustments that he can make with the staff? And I feel good about it. I think they're going to be good, just fine. I don't want to overreact to whatever happens on Sunday. Like if they beat Bill Belichick 37-10, it doesn't mean that Bill Belichick's done and the Dolphins are going to the Super Bowl. If they lose 28-10, it doesn't mean that Mike McDaniel was a bad choice as head coach. And yet,
no, of course not.
I'm waiting for the overreaction.
It's going to come one way or the other. If they win, even if it's a close game, they're going to say, hey, McDaniel in his debut beat Belichick. And I don't care if it's a 13-10 game. He beat him. You know what I mean? And so that's your guy. They're going to do great. And if they lose, they're going to say, oh, man, McDaniel's a great soundbite, but the old guy taught him something in that opener. He's not ready for that head coaching job or what it takes. People overreact regardless, just like Tua. Tua may go out and have a Tyler Van Dyke type game. You know what I mean? Where he only has to throw the ball 20 times because they run the ball well and play good defense and they win ugly. They win 20-10 and Tua maybe didn't have to do much. Or maybe a game where Tua has to throw the ball 40 times because they have to come back or the ground game's not working or it's one of those wild games that a lot of points are scored. Those are things that kind of figure themselves out, but I do think there'll be an overreaction, and it might even come from us. It's okay. We could probably be guilty of it, but it'll be fun to see. I think, when you look big picture of this team, this is my favorite part of the year because it's the part where we're completely wrong as far as what we think of the Dolphins. Because more often than not, I am very optimistic. I am at heart and in nature, Clay, I'm an optimistic person. But as I mentioned earlier about all these years covering the Dolphins, my optimism has not proven to be correct. All these more often than not, because the Dolphins tend to struggle. I will say this though, before we get into our actual predictions, let's not forget, because of all the controversy with Brian Flores and the controversy, with Stephen Ross and the NFL investigations and all these silliness has happened off the field, the Dolphins have had a winning record in back-to-back seasons. That's not easy. It's not easy, certainly for this franchise. It's the first time they've done that in a while. But I mean, they've had back-to-back winning seasons. Now, they haven't been any seasons that produce playoffs or playoff victories or any kind of runs, but they are. It's not like Mike McDaniel took over a team that won 4 games and that's rebuilding. He took over a team that, despite all the controversy and the stuff going on with Flo and Ross and all that stuff, has won more games that they've lost in each of the last 2 seasons. So with that said, Clay, we have to expect that they're going to be better than that, right? That the next step is you have to be better and make the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm going with 10-7. That's my record prediction. I don't know if that's going to be good enough for the playoffs for the same reason.
Burn it.
I think they're going to be better than last year's team and may only have one game better on the record, but in the record book, because the AFC is a gauntlet. I mean, you look across the conference, you could make a case that all 4 teams in the AFC West could make the playoffs. I mean, that Indianapolis, I think, is going to be really good. I think Matt Ryan is a huge upgrade for.
It gives them some consistency. Yeah.
So, and I'm not going to go through every AFC team, but the bottom line is that it's going to be really hard to get to double-digit wins in the AFC, and I think the Dolphins are going to do it. I think they could be a much better team than the 2021 Dolphins, but still only finish with 1 game record. And that's what I'm going with. I think they're going to make significant improvement on offense. I am banking on Tua Tagovailoa going out there and making significant improvements. I think they're going to be good. I am concerned that the depth at cornerback is going to cost this team a game or 2.
That's fair, given especially what happened in camp and in the preseason with the injuries.
And because I mean, look, if you play the Buffalo Bills, you have to worry about Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis. I mean, you go down the line, there are a lot.
They have weapons.
The good teams that you're going to play across the AFC, you don't just have to worry about one receiver. You really don't have to just worry about two receivers. And so when the other team can isolate on your third, fourth, fifth defensive back, that's where I think the Dolphins could run into some issues this year. To me, that's the weak spot. But I still think they're going to be a better team than 2021. I think they'll finish with a better record. Playoffs, I think they're going to be fighting for the last wild card spot or two. My guess is they get it. My guess is they get in, but it's going to be right there on the fringe.
See, I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm not going to take any guesses. I think the Dolphins will go to 11-6, and I think they're making the playoffs.
There you go.
I think they're making the plus. I think this is a team that's ready for that next step. And the reason I say that, Clay, is I mentioned that optimism that I have. I'm an optimistic person. It's not even about me. It's not about optimism. It's not about me wanting to be like a homer and make fans happy. Like, hey, Will thinks they're going to make the playoffs. No, this team, again, back-to-back seasons with winning records. And you go out and you get Tyreek Hill, and you go out, you give Tua a little protection to the offensive line. You go out and you help as far as running backs, Raheem Mostert and Chase Edmonds, again, and Hill himself, just that alone to a team that's on the cusp of making the playoffs and an offense that needs a spark. And then you get a head coach who's so offensive-minded and gifted and understands what being a good offense is about. Whether he becomes a good head coach, we'll have to wait and see. That's stuff that's very hard to predict. But offensively is what this team has been missing the last couple of years, even in winning seasons. So when you put it all together and you make those additions, yes, the Miami Dolphins, it's not optimism. It's not homerism. It's not just appeasing fans. Fans should expect a playoff team. I am not at childhood. I watched the Dolphins as a kid. I liked the Dolphins as a kid. That wasn't my team though, but if I'm a Dolphin diehard fan, I expect the playoffs this year. I don't think there's any reason they shouldn't make the playoffs. Yes, there are issues. As you mentioned, corner depth is a big question mark. When Byron Jones comes back, how do they get through these first 4 games without him? How do they mix and match? I think if the Dolphins are 2-2 through 4 games, I feel pretty good about this team. They're 2-2 through 4 games, and you can get Byron Jones back. And by the way, 4 tough games. And you can then move into the second part of your schedule, and hopefully those playmakers or those guys I just mentioned are chugging along and Tua's playing well. This team, I think, can make a run into the playoffs and make some noise.
Yeah, it would not surprise me one bit. I guess I'm tempering because and people who've gone out to camp, by the way, I think they can back us up on this. Mm-hmm. Man, Tyreek Hill is just different.
Unbelievably different.
He's different than any player I've ever seen relative to his explosiveness, his speed. And by the way, defensive backs say it too. I mean, you had Kayvon Wallace and Carlton Davis when the Dolphins went up against the Eagles and the Bucs, respectively. Not just in games, but also in joint practices.
Mm-hmm. He's different. His speed is just different. It's just that's all there is to it.
That opens up on offense is crazy. I mean, it would not surprise me to see this team be significantly better. I mean, 11 wins, even 12 wins. I mean, I guess if everything that we saw in camp bears out in the regular season, then yes, no doubt about it. I'm kind of tempering the optimism, I guess, a little bit. But there is put it this way. I won't be shocked if they go 12-5. I won't. None of that. I will be more shocked if they go.
If they're bad,
10.
Yeah, I agree. I'd be more shocked if they're bad.
12-5. Yeah.
All right, so it's the Patriots in town on Sunday. We've got the Canes back already. We'll have the Dolphins officially back, and it'll be every week football and football moving forward. We got every week football. Miami Dolphins, the excitement, Clay. I think the excitement level. I think you'll agree with me. It's the highest spin in a while, and given all the stuff that's happened, given all the, for lack of a better term, BS, that's happened with this franchise the last few years. On top of the losing, forget the losing. Losing's bad enough to deal with all the drama behind all the losing. Maybe now things they can move forward. Stephen Ross not around for the moment. Mike McDaniel, the focus, and hopefully the Dolphins get things started off against the Patriots on the right foot. We will be there. We'll bring you coverage. We'll obviously chat about it next week at the Miami Sports Pod. As always, we appreciate you listening and subscribing.